Story 1. The Haunted Dinner Date. I never believed in ghosts. The idea of spirits lingering around us, unseen and unheard, seemed like nothing more than a figment of imaginative minds. So when my friend set me up on a blind date with Alex, a self-proclaimed believer in the supernatural, I chuckled at the irony. Little did I know that our encounter would plunge me into a night of terror unlike anything I had ever experienced. As I stepped into the dimly lit restaurant, I scanned the room nervously, searching for Alex. Spotting him at a corner table, I made my way over, my heart pounding with anticipation and skepticism. He stood to greet me, a charming smile on his face, and I couldn't help but feel a twinge of excitement despite my reservations. "Annie, it's great to finally meet you," Alex said, extending his hand. I shook it with a polite smile, taking in his warm brown eyes and easy demeanor. Maybe this date wouldn't be so bad after all. We settled into our seats, and as we perused the menu, Alex suggested we try the restaurant's famous ghost tour. Apparently, the place was rumored to be haunted, a fact that he found thrilling but I dismissed as nonsense. Ignoring his suggestion, I steered the conversation towards safer topics, eager to avoid any mention of ghosts or the supernatural. But as we delved deeper into discussion, strange occurrences began to unfold around us. First, it was the flickering lights above our heads, casting eerie shadows across the room. Then came the whispers, faint and indistinct, like the murmurs of unseen voices. I glanced around, searching for the source of the sounds, but the restaurant was eerily quiet. "Must be faulty wiring," Alex joked, but his attempt to lighten the mood fell flat as a sudden gust of icy wind swept through the room, chilling me to the bone. I shivered, wrapping my arms around myself, and that's when I saw it. A shadowy figure materializing at the edge of our table, its form indistinct and flickering like a flame. My breath caught in my throat as I stared, unable to tear my eyes away from the apparition. Alex's hand found mine, squeezing it tightly in reassurance, but his grip was just as shaky as mine. "Annie, do you see that?" he whispered, his voice barely audible over the pounding of my heart. I nodded, unable to speak, and together we watched in horror as the ghostly figure reached out towards us, its hand hovering inches from my face. With a cry of fear, I leaped to my feet, stumbling backward in terror. But before we could make our escape, the restaurant's heavy oak doors slammed shut, trapping us inside. Panic surged through me as I rattled the door handle, but it refused to budge. We were locked in, at the mercy of whatever malevolent force inhabited this place. As the reality of our situation sank in, Alex and I exchanged a look of grim determination. We may have been skeptics, but there was no denying the supernatural presence that surrounded us. But amidst our fear, one question lingered in my mind. Where were the restaurant staff during all of this? Surely they must have encountered these occurrences before. Were they used to these paranormal events? As we ventured deeper into the restaurant, searching for answers, we stumbled upon a group of employees huddled in a corner, their faces pale with fear. It seemed they were all too familiar with the restaurant's haunted history, having witnessed firsthand the terrifying manifestations of the spirits. "They come and go as they please," one of the staff members whispered, her voice trembling with dread. "We've tried everything to appease them, but nothing seems to work." It became clear that the staff had become desensitized to the haunting, their daily routines punctuated by ghostly apparitions and unexplained phenomena. But even they couldn't explain why Alex and I had become the targets of the spirit's wrath. As the air grew thick with tension, Alex's eyes met mine, a silent agreement passing between us. With a shared resolve, we knew we had to uncover the truth behind the haunting if we ever hoped to escape the clutches of the unseen force. Searching for clues, we scoured the restaurant, our footsteps echoing eerily in the silence. Every creak of the floorboards sent a chill down my spine, and I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched by unseen eyes. It wasn't long before we stumbled upon a faded photograph hidden beneath a dusty tablecloth, a relic of the restaurant's past. In the old black and white image, a young couple stood arm in arm, their faces illuminated by the soft glow of candlelight. Curious, I turned the photograph over, searching for any clue that might shed light on the haunting. And there, scrawled in faded ink, was a name. Emily and William. Who were they? I wondered aloud, my voice barely a whisper in the oppressive silence. Alex's brow furrowed in thought as he studied the photograph, his fingers tracing the outline of the couple's faces. I don't know, he admitted, his voice tinged with uncertainty. But something tells me they're the key to unraveling this mystery. Determined to learn more, we delved deeper into the restaurant's history, scouring old newspapers and dusty archives for any mention of Emily and William. And as we pieced together their story, a tale of forbidden love and tragic loss emerged. A story that mirrored our own in ways we never could have imagined. Emily, a spirited young woman, had fallen in love with William, a dashing suitor from a rival family. Their romance was forbidden, their love scorned by society, but they refused to be torn apart. Driven by their passion, Emily and William had planned to elope, to escape the confines of their oppressive world and start anew. But their dreams were shattered on the eve of their departure. When tragedy struck in the form of a jealous rival, William was murdered in cold blood, his life snuffed out before it had a chance to truly begin. And in her grief, Emily had taken her own life, unable to bear the pain of living without her beloved by her side. Their spirits, it seemed, were bound to the restaurant where they had once shared their happiest moments, a place haunted by the echoes of their love and the torment of their untimely deaths. With this newfound knowledge, Alex and I embarked on a quest to lay Emily and William's restless spirits to rest, to free them from the shackles of their tragic past. And as we ventured deeper into the heart of the haunting, we uncovered secrets long buried beneath the surface, secrets that threatened to tear us apart. But through it all, we stood united, our bond growing stronger with each passing moment. And when we finally confronted the vengeful spirit that had held us captive, we did so not as skeptics or believers, but as two souls bound together by fate. With a final whispered plea, we begged Emily and William to forgive us, to release us from their grip and set us free. And as the ghostly apparitions faded into the night, a sense of peace washed over us, filling the air with a newfound sense of hope. As we stepped out into the cool night air, hand in hand, I couldn't help but feel a sense of gratitude towards Alex for guiding me through the darkness. Our journey had been harrowing, our trials unimaginable, but through it all we had emerged stronger, united by a love that transcended time and space. And as we disappeared into the night, leaving the haunted restaurant behind us, I couldn't shake the feeling that our story was far from over, that our adventure was just beginning, and that the mysteries of the supernatural world would continue to beckon us forward into the unknown.
Story 2. The Wilderness Nightmare. The crisp autumn air filled my lungs as I stood at the trailhead, the scent of pine trees mingling with the anticipation swirling inside me. Today was the day of my first date with John, an outdoor enthusiast like myself. We had decided to spend our time together hiking in a remote forest, far from the hustle and bustle of the city. As I waited for John to arrive, I couldn't help but feel a rush of excitement at the thought of exploring the wilderness with him. Finally, I spotted John's familiar figure making his way towards me, a wide grin on his face. "Hey, Sophia," he called out, his voice filled with enthusiasm. "Are you ready for our adventure?" I nodded eagerly, my heart racing with anticipation. "Absolutely, let's do this!" With a quick exchange of greetings, we set off on the trail, the crunch of leaves beneath our boots marking our progress. The sun filtered through the trees, casting dappled shadows on the forest floor as we hiked deeper into the wilderness. Conversation flowed easily between us as we shared stories and laughter, our spirits high with the promise of adventure. But as the hours passed, I couldn't shake the feeling of unease creeping over me. The trail seemed to stretch on endlessly, twisting and turning in ways that I didn't remember from my previous hikes in the area. I glanced at John, who wore a similar furrowed brow, his usual confidence replaced by a hint of uncertainty. "We must have taken a wrong turn somewhere," he said, his voice tinged with concern. I nodded, my stomach twisting with apprehension. "Yeah, I think you're right." As we retraced our steps, desperation clawed at my chest. The forest seemed to close in around us, the trees towering overhead like silent sentinels. Panic bubbled up inside me as we realized that we were well and truly lost, with no cell reception to call for help. Night began to fall, casting a blanket of darkness over the forest. Fear gnawed at my insides as we stumbled through the underbrush, our only source of light the feeble beam of John's flashlight. Every rustle of leaves sent my heart racing, my senses heightened by the oppressive darkness. With no other option, we sought refuge in a nearby cave, its mouth gaping like a yawning abyss. The cold stone walls provided little comfort as we huddled together for warmth, the chill of the night seeping into our bones. Sleep eluded me as I listened to the eerie sounds of the forest echoing around us, a constant reminder of our perilous situation. As dawn broke, we emerged from the cave, weary and disheveled from our sleepless night. With grim determination, we resumed our search for civilization, our hopes dwindling with each passing hour. It was then that we stumbled upon the decrepit cabin, its weather-beaten walls standing as a testament to the passage of time. Relief flooded through me as we approached the cabin, the promise of shelter and safety beckoning us closer. But as we pushed open the creaking door, our sense of relief turned to horror at the sight that greeted us within. A flickering candle illuminated the interior of the cabin, casting eerie shadows on the walls. In the dim light, I could make out the figure of a man hunched over a makeshift table, his back turned to us. His long, unkempt hair hung in greasy strands around his face, and his tattered clothes hung loosely from his emaciated frame. "Who are you?" John demanded, his voice trembling with fear. The man turned slowly, his eyes gleaming with madness in the dim light. "Welcome, travelers," he said in a voice that sent shivers down my spine. "I've been expecting you." My heart hammered in my chest as I realized the gravity of our situation. Trapped in the cabin with this deranged hermit, John and I were at the mercy of his sinister whims. The hermit, whose name we never knew, seemed to derive sick pleasure from our predicament. He barred the door with heavy timber, rendering escape impossible. Our only way out was through him. Each day the hermit relished in tormenting us, subjecting us to mind games and psychological torture. He would disappear for hours on end, leaving us alone in the cabin with nothing but our fear and uncertainty. Each creak of the floorboards under his weight sent shivers down our spines, signaling his return. On one particularly harrowing day, the hermit returned with a dead rabbit slung over his shoulder, a twisted grin stretching across his face. He proceeded to cook the rabbit over an open fire, his laughter echoing through the cabin as we watched in horror. The smell of burning flesh filled the small space, a constant reminder of our dire circumstances. But despite the hermit's best efforts to break us, John and I refused to give in to despair. We drew strength from each other, finding solace in our shared determination to survive. We rationed our dwindling supplies, taking turns keeping watch as the other rested fitfully. As the days dragged on, our situation grew increasingly dire. Our meager supplies dwindled, and hunger gnawed at our insides. But still, we clung to hope, knowing that rescue could come at any moment. And then, just when we thought that all hope was lost, salvation came in the form of a search party, their shouts echoing through the forest like a beacon of hope. With tears of relief streaming down our faces, John and I emerged from the cabin, forever changed by our ordeal in the wilderness. The search party found us collapsed on the forest floor, weak and emaciated from our ordeal. They helped us to our feet, wrapping us in blankets and offering food and water. It was a surreal moment, stepping out of that cabin and into the warm embrace of civilization once more. As I sit here now, safe and sound in the comfort of my own home, I can't help but reflect on the events of the last week that brought me to this moment. The wilderness nightmare that John and I endured will forever be etched in my memory, a testament to the strength of the human spirit in the face of unimaginable adversity. But amidst the horror and despair, there is also beauty to be found in our shared struggle for survival. For it was in those darkest of moments that John and I forged a bond that transcended mere friendship, a bond that will endure long after the scars of our ordeal have faded. And so, as I gaze out at the world beyond my window, I am filled with a sense of gratitude for the experiences that have shaped me into the person I am today. For it is only through facing our fears head-on that we discover the true extent of our strength and the depths of our resilience.
Story 3. The Sinister Carnival Date. As the sun dipped beneath the horizon, casting an orange glow across the sky, Jessica and I found ourselves standing outside the gates of the traveling carnival. It was our first date, and we were both eager for a night of thrill and excitement. The air buzzed with the sounds of laughter, the aroma of popcorn, and the flashing lights of the various attractions promised endless entertainment. "Are you ready for this?" Jessica asked, her eyes sparkling with anticipation. "Absolutely," I replied, offering her my arm. "Let's make tonight unforgettable." We bought our tickets and stepped inside, immediately enveloped in the carnival's chaotic energy. We tried our luck at various games, rode exhilarating rides, and indulged in cotton candy until our tongues turned blue. But as the night wore on, we began to crave something more adventurous, something off the beaten path. That's when we spotted it. A dilapidated funhouse tucked away behind the main attractions, its faded sign barely visible in the dim light. "Should we check it out?" Jessica asked, her voice tinged with excitement. I hesitated for a moment, glancing at the decrepit building with a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. But the thrill-seeker in me couldn't resist the allure of the unknown. "Let's do it," I said, taking Jessica's hand as we made our way towards the abandoned funhouse. As we stepped through the creaking doors, a chill ran down my spine. The air inside was thick with an eerie stillness, and the faint sound of distant laughter echoed through the corridors. "Hello?" Jessica called out, her voice trembling slightly. But there was no response, only the faint sound of rustling fabric somewhere in the darkness. As Jessica and I ventured deeper into the abandoned funhouse, the atmosphere grew increasingly ominous. The dim lighting cast long shadows that seemed to dance and flicker, playing tricks on our senses. With each step, the air grew heavier, as if laden with the weight of unseen terrors lurking in the darkness. We navigated through a series of twisting corridors, the walls adorned with faded murals depicting scenes of twisted carnivals and grotesque creatures. The floor creaked beneath our feet, adding to the sense of unease that gnawed at the edges of my consciousness. Suddenly, we stumbled upon a room bathed in an eerie green light. Strange contraptions lined the walls, their purpose obscure and unsettling. In the center of the room stood a towering carousel, its once vibrant colors now faded and peeling. "Should we keep going?" Jessica asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I hesitated, my eyes scanning the room for any sign of danger. But there was nothing, only the quiet hum of electricity and the faint sound of distant laughter. With a nervous nod, we pressed on, our footsteps echoing against the cold concrete floor. But with each passing moment, the funhouse seemed to grow more labyrinthine, its corridors twisting and turning in on themselves, like a maze designed to confound and ensnare. As we turned a corner, we stumbled upon a scene straight out of a nightmare. A room filled with grotesque statues, their twisted forms frozen in eternal agony. Some were missing limbs, others had faces contorted in silent screams of terror. I felt Jessica's hand tighten around mine, her breath coming in short, panicked gasps. But before we could react, the statues began to move, their stone limbs creaking and groaning as they came to life before our eyes. With a scream, we turned and fled, our hearts pounding in our chests as we raced through the twisting corridors, the sound of pursuing footsteps echoing behind us. Finally, we emerged into a room bathed in flickering candlelight. Strange symbols adorned the walls, their meaning lost to time and decay. In the center of the room stood a solitary figure, a carnival fortune teller, her eyes glazed over in a trance-like state. "Ask me your questions," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the sound of our pounding hearts. But before we could respond, the room began to spin, the walls closing in around us like the jaws of some unseen predator. With a cry of alarm, we stumbled backwards, our minds reeling with confusion and fear. And then, just as suddenly as it had begun, it was over. The room returned to its normal state, the fortune teller standing before us as if nothing had happened. We exchanged a bewildered glance, our minds struggling to comprehend the bizarre and inexplicable events that had just transpired. But there was no time to dwell on it, no time to ponder the mysteries of the funhouse. With a shared sense of urgency, we pressed on, determined to find a way out of this twisted nightmare before it consumed us whole. That's when we noticed a figure standing in the corner, a sinister-looking carnival worker dressed in tattered clothing, his face hidden behind a grotesque mask. "Who are you?" I demanded, my voice trembling with fear. The carnival worker said nothing, only watching us with cold, calculating eyes. "We should go," Jessica whispered, tugging at my arm. But before we could make our escape, the carnival worker lunged forward, his movements swift and unexpected. We ran, our hearts pounding in our chests as we raced through the labyrinth of horrors, the carnival worker hot on our heels. Everywhere we turned, he was there, lurking in the shadows, his presence a constant reminder of the danger we faced. But we refused to give up, determined to outsmart our pursuer and find a way to escape the nightmare that had become our reality. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, we stumbled upon a door, a way out. With a burst of adrenaline-fueled energy, we pushed through, emerging into the cool night air. But our relief was short-lived as we realized we were not alone. The carnival worker stood before us, blocking our path, his eyes burning with a manic intensity. "Congratulations," he said, his voice dripping with malice. "You've made it to the final stage of the game." Before we could react, he lunged forward, his hand closing around Jessica's throat. I screamed, the sound echoing through the night as I watched in horror, powerless to stop him. And then, just as suddenly as it had begun, it was over. The carnival worker released Jessica, his laughter fading into the night as he disappeared into the darkness. We were shaken but alive, our hearts still racing with adrenaline as we stumbled away from the carnival, vowing never to return. But as we walked hand in hand into the night, I couldn't shake the feeling that our ordeal was far from over. The sinister carnival date had left its mark on us, a haunting reminder of the dangers that lurked in the shadows. And as we disappeared into the night, I couldn't help but wonder what other horrors awaited us in the darkness, what other twisted games the carnival had in store.